Campsite Media.
What happens when the person most capable of averting a global crisis is also in the middle of a personal one? That's one of the central questions behind The Diplomat, the hit political thriller now entering its third season on Netflix. Created by Debora Cahn, the show stars Carrie Russell as Kate Weiler, a seasoned Foreign Service officer appointed to serve as the U.S. ambassador to the UK. Soon, Kate finds herself dealing with the fallout of the attack on a British warship, a mess of teetering global alliances, the looming threat of war, and in later seasons, a sinister plot launched from within the White House itself. And she must manage it all while fighting to save her marriage to Hal, himself a veteran diplomat. As one early reviewer noted, The Diplomat is, at heart, a show about how the people keeping us from nuclear destruction also forget to button their shirts the right way or suffer heat rash from the stress. It's about how ego, grudges, and resentment have impacted history in ways we may never fully understand. That's this week on Origin Stories. Welcome back to Origin Stories. Our guest today is Debora Cahn, a television writer, producer, and showrunner. Debora launched her career as a scribe on The West Wing and Grey's Anatomy. Later, she served as a writer and executive producer on Homeland. In this episode, we're going to be talking to Debora about The Diplomat, a sharp, propulsive series about diplomacy, marriage, and the cost of service. The Diplomat launched in 2023. The third season debuts this month. Debora, welcome to Origin Stories. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you.
We rarely get an origin story of something that is so scenic and compelling. So tell me if I've got this right. You're working on Homeland. You did the last two seasons, right? You worked on the last two seasons. During one of the last two seasons, you meet a real ambassador.
I do.
Correct?
I do.
Okay.
So on Homeland, every season, the first week of the writer's room was something that we called Spy Camp. The show was based in LA. Everybody would come to Washington, D.C. for a week. And we would have a week of meetings back to back all day long with people from the CIA, with journalists, with policymakers, with generals from the military. The show would just assemble this incredible bunch of serious experts in the field that we thought we might be writing about. And they would talk to us about what their life is like and what they could share with us about the particular area that we were writing about. And person 6 on day 3 of Spy Camp one year was this woman named Ambassador Beth Jones. And she comes in, she's got glasses and, a lovely prim suit and a very, very well managed haircut. And she looks like my Aunt Ruthie. And she's just sweet as can be. And she starts talking quickly. She talks so fast. And she starts talking about what a regular Tuesday looks like when she's on the job as an ambassador. And I felt like I was hearing the plot to some sort of action film. She needs to set up a conversation between this warlord and this senator who's coming to town, and bombs are dropping and planes are exploding. And then there was the nuclear waste that they had to manage and the truck that flipped over. And it felt to her like a very kind of regular story about a regular day. And she was so kind of unassuming about the whole thing and so pragmatic. And I had my little notebook where I took notes during every session. And on that page, on a page that I think I should probably find and laminate or something, it says, "She is a show." It may have said she is a series or she is the series. Because I had been looking since The West Wing, which was my first job, for a way to talk about things, foreign policy things in the way that the West Wing did domestic policy. I mean, they did some foreign policy, but it was largely oriented toward the United States handling the United States. And I was really interested in taking that kind of treatment of what was in many ways impenetrable subject matter and looking at foreign policy in that way. Making it penetrable, making it accessible and experiencing it as simply the world in which a bunch of characters that we really are invested in hang out in. So that was always in the back of my mind. We found a reason that was based on stories that we heard from other ambassadors, and created a world where we could have some of those kinds of conversations about foreign policy, about how the U.S. interacts with the world, and marry it with a little bit of a kind of a wish fulfillment, Raggedy Ann goes to Buckingham Palace kind of feel to it.
I went back and reread the original Times review of The Diplomat. And it was really astute. He talks about the tone.
Yeah.
He's like, you have to remember she also did The West Wing, comparing that to Homeland.
Right.
And I'm so fascinated by this tone conversation. We had Mimi Leader on from the morning show. And I love talking to her about tone because this is something magazine writers and journalists don't think about as much. And you guys have to have a world and an approach to the world that you can see. And when you're describing it, you're talking a totally different language, like a language that I don't really speak.
I listened to that Mimi conversation. She's so fantastic. And it was so much fun to listen to. I was trying to figure out, who is this guy that I'm going to be talking to? But also got a chance to listen to Mimi. And she had this mood board when she was first trying to think about the show. And that a couple of years later, she went back and she was like, oh, wow, it looks like the mood board. I guess I was also thinking about having this conversation with you and kind of where it came from. So many ideas and thoughts and hopes and plans and whatever go into the beginning of a series. You're just writing an hour, right? You're writing half a movie and you're packing it with potential that you're hoping will unfold over years of storytelling. The game that we're trying to win is stay in a viewer's life for years. Make this story interesting to people for years. So when you're doing that, you plant all of these things in the garden, to give it a simple metaphor, and some of them grow and some of them don't. And some of them are just sort of sitting there waiting for you to take advantage of them somewhere down the line. But there's a certain amount that you can control about what the thing is going to turn into. But in a way, it's like having kids, you do spend quite a lot of time with them. You contribute a lot to them, but that doesn't mean you know where they're going to go. It goes from being my project to being something that is a creative collaboration between 200 people. Mm-hmm. So who knows where it goes?
Once you settle on the tone, once you're this is how I want this to be. I want it to be, not too dark. I want it to be serious. I want it to be real. You can't then go and make it like the Office style spoof. You couldn't go and make it. So you are locking in your vision of this world. That's the part that's not reversible, right?
There's a little bit of a cause and effect to what you're saying, which I believed was the case when I went into this project and hasn't been the case. I famously, among the people I work with, was unable to describe the show in the first season. And
wow.
What was it about? Well, is it about people who work in foreign policy? Is it about an ambassador? Is it about what it means to be an embassy? Like what an embassy is? Is it about who we are in the world? Is it about a marriage? It turned out the answer was it's about marriage. It's about a bunch of things, but it is largely about a marriage. And looking back on it, it's like, oh, of course, it's a marriage between two countries and it's a marriage between two people. And it's a long relationship on both parts. And it looks like it's on the rocks at various times. And how is it going to keep going? And how does any long-term relationship actually succeed? What does that look like? But we didn't know that until, I don't know, we learned that in the editing room every episode of the first season. We had other storylines that fell by the wayside because whenever you were watching them, you were like, where's Kate? And what is Hal going to pull next? And that became the focus of the show. And looking back on it, it's like, well, of course, that's what you were. Like they were the two leads of the show. It was about her struggle, but we were trying so many things and we didn't know, it's like making popcorn and a bunch of the kernels are going to pop and some of them aren't. And you don't know which is which. And the actors come in and influence that, and the chemistry influences that, and I'm often misjudging how much time it takes to tell a story. We kept breaking plot in the first season that we thought we were going to get through, and then we got through like the first plot point and couldn't move past it because we wanted to tell a story that had a lot of different perspectives. We wanted multiple American perspectives and we wanted multiple British perspectives. And then sometimes you throw in the Russians and sometimes you throw in any other number of countries. So what that meant, and it was very important to me that there not be like a monolithic position from any nation. I just never, ever wanted to say, well, this is what the Russians think. I wanted to present a character who had a point of view, but was in conflict with somebody else from their own country who had a different point of view. So once you go all the way around that wheel and like represent every spoke and the conflicts among them, you just don't get very far. You don't metabolize very much story. So we had to slow things way down.
When you first envisioned the arc of the first season and you took it to Netflix, I'm assuming somebody has to say, okay, great, go with God. How much survived from that first envisioning to how the first season actually turned out? Like the overall arc was there, right? Like the stuff with Iran and with Russia.
Like I go into a pitch meeting about a show and I say, this is what 7 seasons is going to look like.
7 seasons.
I say 7 because I was brought up in broadcast television, and if you got 7 seasons, that was syndication. So that was always the goal. So I just sort of reflexively think, this is what 7 seasons is going to look like. And I can tell that story. And then I go in and talk about, with my writers, what I believe season 1 is. It's a story that I believe in. I don't think it sucks, but I am only hoping we will outdo it. Like, that's why, it seems like such a ridiculous, scam that I get to bring in all these other writers. It's not like a movie where you have to sit, or a book where you have to sit there and be brilliant. Like, really great writers come in and I'm like, what about this? And they're like, oh, it makes me think of this. And I'm like, oh my God, I never, ever would have crossed my mind. Obviously it's better. And that's what we're going to do. So that happens every season. Sometimes it gets us to the same place. Sometimes it gets us to a different place. The place that we thought we were going to get to at the end of season 1, when I was writing episode 8 of season 1, the last episode, I realized that, like I said before, there was too much story. And I was sort of trying to shoehorn it all in so that we could come to some sort of ending. And that was crazy, and that we should turn episode 7 into 7 and 8, and then what we thought was going to be episode 8 ended up being the entire next season. So the story unfolded, but it unfolded over twice as many episodes as I had anticipated.
That's crazy. But when do you make those decisions? Like, how late in the process can you be like, all right, folks, we're moving this to the next season? Like, literally while it's filming?
I think we were filming episode 4, and I was writing episode 8. And we had a plan that we, like, I try to be so responsible, but like we come up with a plan and we pitch the plan like in good faith to I'm not like going into Netflix to be like, oh, I'm going to pull a fast one on over them. I'm going to like go in and tell them a plan that I don't actually believe in. I believe that we have a plan. I believe that I need to know what we're moving toward. And then, we share extremely detailed outlines of every episode as we figure out what we're going to do moving forward. So like all of that existed. And I was fortunate to be working with people on my show and at Netflix who were understanding about the process and had faith in the show. And I said, we're rushing the story. It's going to sound idiotic if I jam that much plot into the last episode and try and wrap everything up with a bow. The thing that I've written as the end of episode 7 should be the end of the season. Like, why am I writing the end of something and then looking at all the fallout? Like, the fallout is season 2. Now, of course, nobody at that point knew for certain that season 2 was going to exist. But we hoped.
At some point, characters have to do something like you're really like taking them and being like, okay, we have to make this more exciting. Like, we have to make this more exciting. And now, like, this is the curse of doing this kind of interview show where now I just take apart shows in my head. And I'm like, oh, they had to do that because they needed that character to die in the next one. But how do you think about it? And I'm like genuinely curious about this. So you get to a point where you're like, I need this to happen. Are you like, all right, I want to do this as surgically and subtly as possible so the audience doesn't have a clue? Or are you like, well, I know the audience is going to know what I'm doing to a certain extent. Like, what's going on in your head when this is happening?
Oh, like utter whiteout panic is going on in my head. So I am not a plot person. There are people who just like churn out plot, story after story after story. It took me a long time to figure out that there are a million stories out there. I thought there were like 2, and there was the one I liked and the one I didn't like. And I've watched enough TV. Like, I watch TV. I watch a bunch of TV as you do, and you definitely you see the ropes and the pulleys, and I'm always terrified that we're doing like the cheesiest ever schmaltzy, cliche, dumb plot that nobody's gonna be able to engage with. Like, the thing that I hate is like a plot that just bumps you out of the story. Like, I want to sort of go on a ride with the characters, and I just don't want anything to like knock me out and go like, what are they thinking? So I'm always looking for that, and I feel it everywhere. Like, I think every story is implausible, and every story is transparent, and every story is stupid. And so I'm always in this process of trying to bolster things so that they don't knock you out the side there. Like, there's a willing suspension of disbelief, but there's only you got to stop before somebody's like throwing their shoe at the television. And for me, it's also, it is ideal if even people in the fields that we're talking about are not throwing their shoe at the television. Like, that's what those are the things that I'm trying to avoid. So what that means is I'm very wary about big plot moves. And I avoid them when I can. And a lot of times I can't. So I always look at a big plot move and say, this is implausible. And then it turns into like, how do you bolster it? How do you put up enough scaffolding around it to sort of make it feel more plausible, or to at least kind of buy enough goodwill from the audience that they'll make that leap with you. And I think that, you get that now and then. The audience will allow you to do that now and then. If you do it too often, you're making a melodrama. And if that's not what we want to be making, we have to be somewhat restrained in how often we try to pull a rabbit out of a hat. So the end of season 2, Kate's husband Hal says something to the president of the United States, and he finds it so disturbing that he drops dead. Now this is like when this idea first came up in the writer's room, I was like, well, like Hal could just go in and tell him the truth of the secret that they've been trying to hide, and it's just like so shocking, it just friggin' kills him. And so meanwhile, Kate's been out talking to this woman who's the vice president and about how she thinks she's hatched a terrorist plot. And now that woman is president. So like, what happens when you just told somebody you think they're evil and then they become your boss? That the idea of how do you work for somebody with whom you have conflict and do not agree seemed like a really, really great story. But the idea of Hal says something and then this guy drops dead seemed just ridiculous and absurd. And so it turned into a process of like, how much can we ground things on the runway to that moment that we've kind of, generated enough goodwill. How do you, even things as simple as like, I didn't want to see it happen. We're not in the room when it happens. We hear about it with Kate. Kate hears about it on a telephone, which is another way to kind of lower the intensity of it. And Hal tells her about it. Hal describes the experience that he had seeing it happen and possibly being the cause of it. And she says what happened, and Hal says, I told the president, and he got really upset. And when I figured out that line, when I figured out like the way that we were going to explain to the audience, the president of the United States dropped dead because he got a piece of information that he couldn't handle. When I figured out the only thing he's going to be able to articulate is, well, I told him and he got really upset. I was like, okay, that we can do. That I understand. It's so absurdly understated that we can do. And it's preceded by, this thing happens and then he comes out and he has to call his wife and he doesn't have his phone because there's no cell phones in this room. And are you going to call on a line land and can somebody get there? So it was like hampered down with like administrative, irritating technology sludge. All of that is there to reduce the implausibility of the central plot point.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, look, I think you're describing what some mystery writers do. Like, I love detective stories. And I've never actually asked a writer of detective stories if this is true. I just assume it's true. They get to a point, like they've made a decision about what they're going to do with who the killer is or who's culpable in some way. And then they go back and seed little lines throughout the story that, like, I always assume it's retrofitted in there once the decision is made. Although maybe there are these like amazing human beings who know everything completely in advance and are like seeding it as it goes along. Maybe they exist.
Maybe they do.
But I don't think that's how most creative people do.
Yeah, it's hard to make a story work at all. Like just at all. There are times There are times when, like, I'm watching something with my husband, and he doesn't like a plot move in something that he sees, and he's like, "How did they let that happen?" And I say, "We think everything is that absurd. Like, all we're doing is trying to make it slightly less shitty. We're trying to have a pile of bad ideas that is smaller." That's the story breaking process. Like, you come up with these circumstances and they're absurd and they're unrealistic. And if they were realistic, they would be a documentary and probably not a very interesting one. So you're just constantly in this battle of how do you keep people on board in what are, by definition, implausible circumstances.
I think when it really sticks out for viewers, or it does for me, is when someone seems to be going against the character that's been established by the writers of the show or the novel. It's like, I will swallow anything plot wise unless it seems like something that the character just fully would never do. And then I'll be like, no, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about entertainment versus accuracy versus politics. So you got a lot going on in the show. You're balancing a lot. What's in the Venn diagram of your head when you're thinking about the show, when you're thinking about accuracy, entertainment, illuminating a world for somebody, I guess is closer. Anyway, the Venn diagram, where do all of these sit for you?
So we start with research, and we do what Homeland did. We meet with a lot of people. We talk to a lot of people. We get a lot of stories. And then eventually we pick one, and our fealty is then to the story. It's not to the research. Like, we've found something in the world that we think is meaningful. Like, that for me matters. I think that there's enough crazy shit going on in the world that we don't need to make things up. Like, the essential conflicts are pretty darn interesting and engaging. I wish they were less so. So we choose something that we think is worth talking about, that exists in the world. And then we come up with some sort of fictional character-based story that grounds it in the world we've created and the characters that we've created. And as soon as we have something we believe in, then fiction is what's going to get it to the end of the day. Now, I very much feel like I respond to authenticity in shows that I watch. So along the way to telling a story that has, a real core, that's about something in the world that I think matters, if you can pad it with veracity, then I think the audience goes on a longer ride with you. And I think the audience has an easier time sitting through it and feeling like it's not kind of just gratuitous fluff. There's a real thing in the beginning that I think is important. And then to talk about that important thing, we come up with a story that's going to be fake. And when there's a moment of conflict between the fact and the story is going to win. Given the notion that the story is always going to win, we pack in as much detail as possible along the way, because it I think helps the audience believe in the world.
My guess, and I think this is what the show does so well, is it never feels preachy or like too explainy, like a show. My kids watch Ask the Story Bots. Like, I never feel like I'm watching an Ask the Story Bots about ambassadors or diplomats. And I think the reason is that you must already know it. Like, an internalization happens where you understand this world well enough to then allow it to go to the backdrop and just focus on the people inside it.
Where we are in the Venn diagram, like, we're nudging it all the way through the process, all the way to all the way through post-production, all the way through editing. We spent like an hour in sound editing talking about what chair squeak would not be funny. Like we couldn't have a funny chair squeak because it would undermine the moment, and we were about to do something fairly dramatic, so everything had to be totally grounded and feel real. It was one of those moments like the guy drops dead. It was important that that everything have a kind of a verite quality to it, so that we could then bring in this big plot move. So the chair squeak was analyzed for that. Like phones ringing, like we had to have a not funny ring. We had to have a not funny text thing. We had to have like not funny car horns. That's what it was. It was all about the car horn. There was a car horn that was too funny, and it just sort of like put you in the mode of this is a comedy and things are silly, and it had to exist but so completely fade into the backdrop. Yeah, it's just it's a struggle all the way through. It's a process of like using every element of the production process to bolster the plausibility of the story in that case.
Last question for you. How do I know if someone in my life is a spy or not? Like if I've got a sneaking suspicion they're a spy, how would I know for sure? Would they ever tell me? Well, they'd never tell me.
So what I've heard is if you are marrying them before you guys get engaged, like what is considered the stand-up thing to do is before you get engaged, or just after you get engaged, you tell your partner what you do with your life. Because if they're in it for the long haul, they do need to know, and certain things will happen that will be not explainable in any other way. So sometimes there's an engagement, and then there's that disclosure, and then there is not a marriage that follows because the person is like, oh, that's not what I signed up for. And sometimes the partner's like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. And it explains why you're always looking for the back entrance to restaurants that we go into.
But sometimes they have cover jobs. This is what's so confusing. Like sometimes they have an inexplicable cover job, like they work for the State Department, or they're like a lecturing professor or something. But I guess you're right. I'm thinking about my father-in-law, to be clear. I'm pretty sure he's a spy. He worked for the State Department for a long time. I'm probably outing him right now.
I have gone through the same thought process about my father. He was a nuclear engineer. He designed power plants and sold them in the Far East. Sold a power plant in South Korea, spent a lot of time in South Korea, spent a lot of time in China. And I was like, what was that dude really doing?
You know what I think the answer is for both of us is it's probably like in the murky middle. There's like, you don't have to, in other words, you don't have to be a full-time spy to occasionally be in contact with your government about things they might find interesting, which might have been the case with your dad.
Yeah, could be.
We outed everybody. We did it. Everybody's out in the open, including Bruce. Deborah, thank you so much for doing this. It is such a good show.
You're welcome. It's so fun to talk to you.